Welcome to 5 Minute Fridays. Today I thought I'd talk about one of my favorite styles of photography, which is black and white photography. So let's kind of go over the reasons why you may want to shoot with black and white versus, let's say, color photography. For a lot of people who don't know, I shoot a lot of landscapes, and what I like to do is actually edit my photos both in color but also in black and white. So let's kind of go over it. The first main reason I think a lot of people might want to shoot black and white is mostly for, I would say, getting rid of distracting color, if you will. And so what might happen in certain shots or even in certain portraits you might be doing is that the color might be a bit much and too distracting. And so shooting in black and white takes away that unnecessary effects, if you will, and take away the focus of what you're trying to tell with your photography. So implementing it with black and white, it essentially almost narrows the field of view and focuses more on the subject than anything else. The other prominent aspect, I suppose, of black and white photography that I like the most is that it provides more of a timeless feel or a classic quality, if you will. As many of you know, one of the artists I really love to follow the most was Ansel Adams' work, and most of his shots are mostly shot in black and white, and some of his most famous shots have that timeless feel. So for example, if I go to Yosemite National Park and try to recreate one of his famous images, what black and white photography allows me to do is that you can't really tell where this was taken from. Was it taken, a couple years ago when I went and visited him during my trip, or was it taken 60 years ago, 60, 70 years ago when Ansel Adams actually took it himself? So that's kind of one of the really nice things about black and white photography, is it allows you to have this classic timeless feel. Prominent thing I like about black and white photography is its ability to amplify and create negative space. So for those who don't know what negative space is it creates an atmosphere or a central focal point, really, if you will, on your photo or your video. And what's really nice about this is that this picture right here of a long exposure, creating a lot of negative space around the river, really focuses in on the actual subject itself, which is this pier. It essentially narrows the view, and same thing could be applied when you take a portrait. And when you take a portrait of someone, it narrows the field and focuses really on the features of the person, in this case for the portrait. So there's a lot of really great feel and demonstrations of adding or taking away negative space in photography. One of my other really prominent things I like about black and white photography, at least for landscape photography, is the ability to highlight shape, form, and texture. And so what do I mean by that? When you're taking a photo of, let's say, mountains, or this particular one in Arches National Park, what you might notice is that there's a lot of color everywhere, and there's a lot of things happening in the photo. But when you shift it over to black and white, what's really nice about it is add more focus, in this case to the rock formation in the picture, but it also allows you to focus in more on the center, which is what I was trying to go for. But if you highlight it just with the right edit, you could actually highlight a lot of the texture of the rock as well. Or let's say you're doing a portrait, you could really highlight the texture of a person's skin, if that's what you're going for. So with black and white, it's a lot easier to highlight that contrast of the textures, form, and shape than, let's say, if you're doing it with color, because the colors might be too distracting left and right everywhere. So you don't always want to be doing that. Focus of the image, it adds to that mystique, if you will, and really helps you focus in on that. So, and I would say one of the last things I would probably add in here is probably the fact that in some cases I would say black and white photography is actually a creative constraint. What do I mean by that? When you're dealing with a lot of color and shooting and trying to tell different stories over time, what makes it very difficult is the fact that sometimes there's too much light and it's harder to play around and measure that light, if you will. But with black and white photography, it actually makes it easier, and you only see a smaller spectrum of color, and so you could focus in on more of the subject itself of what you're telling. You might highlight tones a little bit better. You might avoid color to focus more on, let's say, the actual story. So let's take, for example, a couple who's getting married. Black and white photography for wedding photography is probably one of the better examples of when to really shoot black and white is because when the couple's getting married, they may want to keep this photo for years and years to come. Having it in color may, well, date it, but it also might take away from the magic is how people remember. Some people don't necessarily always remember in color, but a lot of people do remember things very well with emotion with black and white imagery. So when you shoot black and white and do that couple's portrait in black and white, it helps eliminate that limitation that color might arrive. Later on, there might be better images, better quality, better sensors for taking photos, but if you set it with only the intention of the black and white photography, it'll actually allude to better overall lasting impressions and lasting impact overall. So these are kind of the reasons why I really like black and white photography. And if you haven't tried it before, give it a shot. I'll post some of my examples on Instagram so you can view it, but in another video I'll show you a tutorial on how I actually edit with black and white. So stay tuned for that video, and until then, until the next video, later.